If you're a fan of the channel, consider supporting me on Patreon. For as little as $1 per month, you can help me continue to bring you premier Unmatched content. Unlock exclusive rewards by becoming a patron today.
What's up guys, Zero Skater here, and I know it's been a while, but we are finally back with some more content, this time for the brand new Unmatched Slings and Arrows unboxing, of course. So, we're going to open up the box, show off all the contents, you guys will finally get to see what all the hype is about, and I'll give my thoughts on all the new decks and everything. It's going to be a good video. I hope you're all excited because this set is awesome, and I can't wait to get into it. But, as always guys, be sure to attack that like button if you enjoy the video, and subscribe for more Unmatched content. And with that said, let's not wait any longer. We'll check out the brand new Unmatched Slings and Arrows. Alright, here we are about to open up the new Unmatched Slings and Arrows. This set has Shakespeare, Titania, Hamlet, and the Wayward Sisters, and man, am I excited to open this up. This is probably the most excited for a new set I have been since Cobble and Fog, and that was way back when I first started playing the game. Cobble and Fog was the first new set to release, so wow, I'm hyped for this, so let's go ahead and crack this thing open. Alright, Slings and Arrows. Let's take a look at the art panels. As always, looks like there's Titania there. We got some really sweet Wayward Sisters art. And then we got Hamlet, I'm assuming. And Shakespeare. Super cool, super cool. I cannot wait. Obviously, we'll take a look at the back here. So Shakespeare looks like the actors as multiple sidekicks. The Wayward Sisters are a 3-part hero. That's pretty cool, just like the Raptors. Really excited to see that. Hamlet with the sidekick Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Looks like 2 people, but a single token, and I could be wrong, but we'll find out when I open it. Titania has the sidekick Oberon. So, really, really cool looking here. Cannot wait to open this up, so let's not wait any longer. And it is interesting to note that at least Shakespeare was one of the winners of the deck design contest a few years back, finally being released. We've seen already Houdini and Genie, and then Oda Nobunaga and Tomoe Gozen from the design contest. And so Shakespeare is the next winner that is being released, and then the Wayward Sisters are actually a runner-up. So 2 of them from the design contest in 1 box. Not sure where the other 2 came from, but super cool. So let's take a quick look at the rule book. This is the core rules that are released in every new Unmatched set. I'm not going to spend much time with this other than pointing out that my name is in the book right there. So that's pretty cool. We got the little pamphlet as always, just advertising the different Unmatched sets. There's Sun's Origin, the most recent set. Tales to Amaze, obviously an amazing set as well there. Alright, Slings and Arrows. Let's take a look at the rule book here. So the Wayward Sisters, Hamlet, Doomed Prince, Titania Fairy Queen, and William Shakespeare. Super cool. Special rules for the set. We're not going to get into all that quite yet, but there, if you guys want to read it, you can see it. I have not spoiled any of this. I literally, before I opened up this box, like the actual shipping box, and saw the box cover, I had no idea who the 4 heroes in the set even were. The only thing I knew was, hey, it's the Shakespeare set. So I only knew Shakespeare. I knew nothing else. But this is a big old thing here. I don't know what this is for, but I am pretty excited to find out. And then we got some other, yeah, a lot of weird tokens here, along with the health dials. So that is pretty exciting. And let's see what this new map is. Alright, looks like the Globe Theater. Interesting. It doesn't look like there's anything crazy unique about this one, but I love the symmetry. I love how it actually looks like a theater, and it's yeah, like I said, very symmetric. Just really basic looking map, but it's a nice looking one. Just because it's basic doesn't mean it's not interesting, because we've seen plenty of somewhat basic maps that are really cool, like the most recent Azuchi Castle. That was a really interesting one, and there's no gimmicks on that. So let's see here. We got what is this? Sidekicks? Sidekick tokens in a little. They've never come in this little paper package before. Look at that. We got all the sidekicks though, huh? Let's go, I guess, one at a time. We'll take a closer look. This is the actors. Oh, would you look at that? Oh, that's cool, yeah. So you got the male on one side and then the female version on the other side. Very cool. 3 of those. We have, what is this? Oberon. Cool. And this is the one that I'm not going to dare try to pronounce without reading it. I have no idea. I don't remember, but there you go. These tokens are actually a little bit less, they're more rounded than the standard tokens. It's a little bit different. We got these rivets and junk we don't care about. Let's take a look at the minis. Okay. So here we go with Titania first. So, alright, some kind of fairy queen. I like the wings. I love the purple color. Purple's probably my favorite color, so big fan of that. And then we have, looks like Hamlet here. This is a great mini. He's got the crown, holding the skull with the sword there. Or would you call that a rapier? I'm not too sure, but I really like this mini. It's very noble looking. And then we got Shakespeare. So look at him with his quill. The pen is mightier than the sword, so they say. I guess we're going to find out when we put him to the battlefield. But there you go. There's Shakespeare for you. And the Wayward Sisters. Let's see. They do look like they're all actually unique, which is cool. Just like the Raptors. They have that same green coloring like the Raptors do. So is this just going to be like the Raptors but actually good, or what? That would be super cool. Nothing against the Raptors. They're fun. They're just not the most competitive. But yeah, these are cool. I like how we have three unique figures here. Just a lot to show off. I like the like etchings here in the bottom of the cloaks that all of them have. That's really cool. Alright, cool minis, cool minis. Now when it comes to the decks, like I said, I have not seen any of these cards. I have no idea what any of this does. I don't know the mechanics, don't know the cards. I just found out the heroes. So I'm very excited to open these up, which I will do. I'm going to play a game with them, as I always do, without looking at any of the cards. Because that's always the most fun, because then every card you draw is like, whoa, that's crazy. And it's all such a fun, exciting surprise. So what are these? Glamours? These are glamour cards, huh? Interesting. I wonder if these are like continuous effects. I mean, we'll go over these again after I play it and find out what this is all about. But looks cool. Nice. Alright, yeah, I'm going to go try these out, and I will be back, and we'll go over the decks and everything in just a little bit. One more thing, though, before I go actually play. Let me take these out so I don't worry about them all falling all over the place. I'm going to show off the inner side panels that I always forget. I love the green. Super cool. The Wayward Sisters are the ones probably I am most excited to play. Again, I know nothing about them, but just based off of the visuals, from what I've seen, the art on the box cover and the minis and all that stuff, and just the fact that they're a 3-part hero, they're definitely the ones I'm looking to play the most. So they're probably going to be the ones I play in just a second here, and I can't wait to play all of them, though. Honestly, this is just super exciting. So I'm going to go play them. I'll be back. Alright, so I just finished up my first game of Slings and Arrows. I played as the Wayward Sisters, so we'll be going over that deck first, but it was a lot of fun. We did just a 3-player free-for-all, so Shakespeare was not involved in our first game, but I did look through his deck, and it looks pretty crazy. So let's go ahead and jump into the Wayward Sisters. So they are a melee move 2 hero. There are 3 of them, much like the Raptors. Their starting health is 6, so that is pretty low, but if you add it all up, you have 18, which is relatively respectable. And the ability is Bubbling Brew, so your cards go into your cauldron instead of your discard pile. After you attack, you may cast 1 spell that you have the ingredients for. If you do, you discard all of the cards in your cauldron. So the spells depend on the symbols that are on the cards in your cauldron. So every time you play the card, it goes in your cauldron, much like the discard pile, but they'll stay there separately until you cast a spell, and then you have to spend all the cards in the cauldron. You don't get to pick and choose, so that is an important distinction. But we'll go over the spells in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and jump into the cards in the deck. So the first one being Double Double. Red 3, there are 3 copies, 2 boost value, it's an any. During combat, increase the value of this card by +1 for each different ingredient symbol in your cauldron. I did mention it was an any, but I believe all the cards in this deck are any's, so don't have to worry about that. They can all use every card. The symbol here is the little claw. So there are 3 different symbols, the claw, a bat wing, and I can't remember what the last one is. Oh, it's a snake here. Okay, but anyways, during combat, you increase by +1 for each different ingredient in your cauldron, so it can be up to a 6 value attack, and 3 copies of this, that is pretty dang strong. So, Double Double, very good. Next card is going to be Hurly Burly, so a red 3, also 3 copies. This one is the snake symbol. During combat, reveal the top card of your deck. Your opponent chooses one, so they're either going to put that card into your hand, so it was card draw, or they're going to put that card in your cauldron and you add its boost value to this card's value, which is essentially a blind boost onto this card, but it goes in your cauldron, of course, instead of your discard pile. So I think both of these effects can be very strong. I just really don't like how your opponent gets to choose, because of course they're always going to choose the worst option for you, and that means the effect is always just going to be mediocre. So with a 1 boost value also, I'm not a huge fan of Hurly Burly. I would have liked it if the sisters got to choose. But moving on, we're going to see the All-Seeing Familiar. It's a red 4, 2 copies, 2 boost value. Again, it's the claw symbol. Now this one says immediately return a card in your discard pile to your cauldron. And then after combat, if you won the combat, look at the top card of your deck and put it in your hand or your cauldron. So that is pretty good. Immediately you get to return something to the cauldron, which means after you finish this attack, you will be able to cast any spell that you would like. And then the after combat is not nearly going to trigger very often because you have to win. You can win with 4s, of course, but it's not super likely. You know, if they max value block or if they faint, you won't get that effect. But the effect isn't anything that crazy anyways. It's just looking at the top card, either drawing it, sometimes you actually don't want card draw, or it's putting it in your cauldron, which is milling yourself a card from deck, so that's pretty risky as well. So not a huge fan of the after combat effect, but the immediately effect on this card is quite good. And I believe it's their highest printed value attack, so that's important to note as well. It's a good feint punish. But moving on to some defense, we have Toil and Trouble. During combat, increase the value of this card by +1 for each different ingredient symbol in your cauldron. 3 copies. It starts off as a 2 value defense. 3 boost value is important. It's a snake symbol, but much like Double Double, this just increases for every different ingredient in your cauldron, so it could be a 5 value block, which of course is very strong. Then we're going to see Pricking of My Thumbs. After combat, deal damage to the opposing fighter equal to the amount of combat damage your fighter took. So it's a 2-value defense. There's 2 copies. 1 boost value is low, but this is much like Skin Like Titanium from Luke's deck. So you just deal back the damage that you take, which can be really good. If they hit you for a 6 into this, you're probably pretty happy because your sister may not even die off, and you get to deal a huge chunk of damage back to your opponent. And the thing is, if they overkill you into this, they're still taking a big chunk. Like, let's say you're only at 2 health, and they throw a 6 at you because they want to guarantee a kill on one of the sisters, and you play this, well, you took 2 damage, essentially, because you only had 2 health left, but they still take 4, which is really, really good. So it's a pretty nice auto damage card there. Next up, we see Unnatural Remedy, a 1-value defense. Immediately, though, you get to discard up to 3 cards from your cauldron, and for each one, you choose a fighter to recover 1 health, and you may choose the same fighter more than once. So you're able to divvy up that healing amongst all of your sisters in any way that you choose. So that is pretty nice. You could also heal the opposing fighter for whatever reason. Maybe you're going up against Annie Christmas and you don't want her to have her ability. That's a funny little thing to note there, but I don't think this card is that crazy strong. It is much like the Lamp from Genie, which can be very good, because if they bait attack you and they attack low, like let's say they hit with a regroup into this, you can net up to 3 healing, which is really nice. But you have to discard up to 3 cards from your cauldron to do so, and your cauldron is not always going to be super full, so I find this to be very costly, but it's an interesting effect nonetheless. Next card is Fire Burn and Cauldron Bubble. There's 3 copies of this, 3-value versatile. It's finally, looks like the first bat symbol that we've seen here. But immediately return a card in your discard pile to your cauldron. This, again, is quite good, much like the All-Seeing Familiars effect. You returning a card immediately to your cauldron means that you get to cast any spell after you attack with this card that matches, that has a bat included, right? So you can do a bat plus claw or bat plus snake by attacking with this card, and that's pretty nice. Unless, of course, they feint it, then you still deal a damage. You're probably pretty happy with that being just a pretty common 3-value versatile here. But pretty good card overall. Next up, we're going to see Ward, also 3 copies and also a 3-value versatile. But after combat, you get to place the opposing fighter in any space in your fighter's zone. So you get to move the opponent. Anytime you get to move the opponent, it's a pretty strong effect. This is a good combo breaker as well. So nothing too crazy, only being a printed 3, but a pretty strong card regardless. The Stars Align. This is one of their big cards, so it's a 0-value versatile, but during combat, the value of this card is equal to the number of different zones all of your fighters are in. So of course, if you have 3 sisters alive still, that's probably pretty likely that this is a 3 at minimum, and maybe more like a 6. It can be pretty crazy high, depending on the map, of course, and the layout of the zones, but it's a pretty reliable, I would say, 4-ish value block, which is a max value block. That's great. You can also attack with it. If they feint it, you don't deal any damage, unfortunately, but if they value block it, you might have this thing being a 6 and deal 2 damage over the top. And with 3 copies, this is a pretty good card. And then next up is one of my favorite cards, actually, Curious Familiar. 3-value boost, which is nice, but there's only 2 copies in the deck. You probably don't want to be boosting with this because after combat, you return a card in your cauldron to your hand. So this is a form of recursion. It's a little limited because it has to be from your cauldron, not your discard pile. But in a way, this is much like a Battle Hardened. Now, of course, if you attack with a familiar and there's another familiar in your cauldron that you used previously, you can pick up the other familiar. And then anytime you attack with a familiar, as long as you're attacking with it, it puts it into your discard pile, well, your cauldron rather, and then you can always pick it back up with another copy of these, but if you defend with one, then it breaks the cycle, so to speak. But it's kind of like Little Red's big hands, so you can just keep picking it back up. Pretty interesting. I just really like this card. The versatility of returning anything from your cauldron back is really nice, and even if the cards are in your discard pile, of course, you can use something like Fire Burn and Cauldron Bubble, or the All-Seeing Familiar to return them to the cauldron before you pick it back up to your hand with the familiar. So this is, in my opinion, one of the coolest cards in the deck. I really like that a lot. And then we have a couple of schemes. Something Wicked This Way Comes. So this is a 3-value boost, which is pretty nice. But what you do is you just cast any spell, then you cast a different spell, and you don't discard the cards from your cauldron to cast the spells. So it is a double spell casting scheme, and the spells are free to cast. So that's pretty nice. The versatility that this gives is really, really nice. And again, we'll get into the spells in just a second. Let's just look at this last card, being Prophecy, which is now a common card. This is originally from Merlin in King Arthur's deck, but you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, put 2 into your hand, and the other 2 back on top of your deck in any order. So that can help set up the deck stacking for effects like Hurly-Burly, or All Seeing Familiar. You know, not super impactful, but it's something to think about. And it's some nice card draw as well. I think overall the Sisters, because their ability requires you to be attacking in order to cast spells, you really want to be attacking often. So they're a relatively aggressive fighter. So I also did realize that all cards go into the discard pile. So what I said about Familiar, you actually can use this as a Battle Hardened and keep defending with it and just picking back up the other copy from your cauldron, as long as you don't cast a spell. So that's a pretty nice loop that you're able to get in this deck. But yeah, Prophecy, nothing too crazy, but again, good card draw. And let's go ahead and take a quick look at what the spells are. So I need to pull out the cauldron in order to take a look at that, but look at this massive thing here is the cauldron. So let's take a look, all of our spell options. For a snake and a bat, you can draw 1 card, and then one of your fighters recovers 1 health. That is really nice to get extra healing as needed, especially being a low 6 starting health fighter. Then the snake plus claw, you get to move any fighter up to 3 spaces. So again, you're able to move the opposing fighters or your own fighters with this. That is pretty nice. And then the claw plus bat, you deal a damage to a fighter that shares a zone with any of your fighters. So auto damage is always very nice. You get to deal the auto to any fighter that's in a zone of any of your sisters, not just the one who attacked and is casting the spell. And then if you have 1 of each, you can simply gain 1 action. So there is some cool combo potential in this character. So again, I think they're pretty aggressive. They don't have any passes in their deck. I guess technically their scheme, Something Wicked This Way Comes, could be a pass, depending on what you choose, because of course you don't have to choose the card draw and action gain. You could choose the move 3 and deal damage, and then in that case it would be a pass, but there's only 2 copies, and that might not be the most powerful option that you can have at the time. And otherwise, you know, multi-heroes are not typically very good in fatigue because they all start taking fatigue damage once they hit exhaustion. And with only 6 starting health, if they ever do hit exhaustion, they're probably just going to die off very, very quickly. So they're going to want to be pretty aggressive. You want to be casting spells, and that's going to be the fun part of this deck, is optimizing your spell usage. Because if you say attack and you've matched up the 2 symbols, but it's not a spell you currently want to cast because it doesn't really help you in the moment, then you're kind of missing out, because then if you attack again, of course you could cast a different spell, but now you're kind of wasting one of the ingredients that you had in your cauldron. So you're not maximizing your efficiency in that case. And so it's going to be really tricky to play this fighter well, because they're all about maximizing the efficiency with your spells, and that may be difficult to do. But again, it's going to be super cool to see anybody who really does master this fighter. I think they are a lot of fun, and I'm really interested in playing more of them myself. But that is the Wayward Sisters for you, so let's go ahead and move on to our next fighter. Okay, so the next fighter we have is Hamlet. So Hamlet is a melee fighter, move 2, starting health of 15. And Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are the sidekick, melee fighter as well, starting health of 6, and the ability is The Question. So at the start of your turn, you choose either to be or not to be. If you choose not to be, deal 2 damage to one of your fighters. And then the passive abilities are, if you pick to be, then whenever you maneuver, you draw an additional card. So you're going to draw 2 cards for every maneuver, which of course can be very good or bad depending on the fatigue outlook there. Sometimes you want to regroup cards in your hand really quickly to keep up pressure. Sometimes you really don't want to be drawing cards from your deck. So it'll be really interesting to see how that is utilized. And then not to be, you add +2 to the value of Hamlet's attacks. It is specifying Hamlet himself, just the hero, not your sidekicks. But still, +2 on your attacks. We know how strong that is from characters like Alice or Achilles or, Moon Knight with Kanju. Really, really strong. But in order to choose the not to be, you have to deal 2 damage to one of your fighters. And you can choose any of your fighters, either being Hamlet the hero himself or the sidekick Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They are basically just a battery, as we'll see in this deck. They don't have any unique cards to them, so they're pretty much just an extra health pool to use your ability for the question here. Really strong ability though. I guess I should pull out the little token. Again, you have either to be, that's the double draw on the maneuver, or you have not to be, and that is the +2 to the value of Hamlet's attacks that turn, but you have to deal the 2 damage in order to do so. Alright, let's get into the cards. Cruel to be Kind. I had already revealed this one. It's a 2 value attack for boost value. During combat, you may boost this card 2 copies. So now you see how scary this card can be, because of course, if you choose not to be, this is essentially a printed 4. It will deal 2 damage if cancelled over the top of a feint, and if not cancelled, it's already a 4, so you're essentially getting full damage value over a max value block, like a skirmish. So this card's very strong. There's 2 copies in the deck. Definitely something to look out for. Next card is also very powerful. We have Uncertain Doom. So a 2 value attack, but it's an any this time, so the sidekick can use it. 3 boost value, also important. There's 3 copies. And during combat, if your opponent played a versatile card, you ignore its value. So if they feint, you deal the 2 over the top, as long as you have your +2. And if they play a skirmish, most max value blocks, for that matter, skirmish, leap away, exploit, those are all versatiles. So this would ignore the value of the versatile and just deal 4 damage right through it. And even if you're not using the not to be ability for Hamlet, you can have the sidekick attack with this. If it's feinted, yeah, it won't deal any damage, but again, anything else like a skirmish or a dash or whatever, this would go through and still deal 2 damage. So Uncertain Doom, really, really strong card here. And 3 copies with a 3 boost value to utilize with the Cruel to be Kind is also really nice. Next card, To Sleep, Perchance to Dream. 3 value, any attack. There are 3 copies. After combat, if you won the combat, you move the opposing fighter a number of spaces up to the amount of combat damage dealt. If you lost the combat, Hamlet recovers 1 health. So the movement effect is like the web kick, swinging web kick from Spider-Man. So that is pretty good for getting the opponent away from you, and if you won the combat, of course, that means you also dealt damage, so that's really good. But then if you lost the combat, at least you get to heal 1, and your health is very precious in this deck, seeing as often you're going to want to deal yourself damage in order to get your +2 onto your attacks. So, next card up is The Rest is Silence. I had just revealed this card as well, but it's really cool. After combat, you end the turn. Since Defender resolves first, this would negate, essentially, any after combat effects from the opponent, so that's really nice. And if they was their first action attacking, they don't get to do anything else. So this card is really, really strong. It's only a printed 2, so that you are going to take some damage most likely, unlike Luke's Trash Talk, which bumps up to a 4, but still a really nice card to have. And again, the 3 boost value, also important. Then we have Maddening Insight, so a blue 0. That sounds pretty scary. But during combat, the value of this card is equal to the number of cards in your hand. So that could be up to a 7 value defense, which is really, really strong. But important to note, it's a during combat, so if they do an offensive cancel, you will take damage over your 0. But then after combat, if you won the combat, also your opponent discards a card. So again, very, very powerful card here. They're going to want to offensively feint this card, most likely. The offensive feint would also stop the Rest is Silence from ending the turn, so I think that's something you want to probably look out for if you're playing Hamlet. But this card, really strong. Next up, Nothing Either Good or Bad. So this card is pretty much just bad, unfortunately. It says after combat, if your opponent played a versatile card, deal 2 damage to the opposing fighter. Now that sounds really strong in theory, and indeed it is, if you could actually pull off the effect. But most attacks are reds. Most often, people are attacking with their red cards, and usually versatiles are used for defense more often than attacks. So it's not super likely that you're going to actually trigger this, and in that case that you're not, you're just playing a blank 2, and that is really, really bad. So I really wish this card had a higher boost value or something to make better use of it, but you know, if you want to gamble, you might get some auto damage out of it. So just shouldn't expect it. Next up, Blood will have Blood. After combat, if Hamlet took damage this turn, you deal 1 damage to the opposing fighter. So there's 3 copies. It's pretty low printed value, but if you attack with your ability buffing your attack, then it's a 4 that will also deal an auto damage. Because, of course, you took damage this turn if you choose not to be. So that's pretty nice. It's a good attack. It's not a great defense because it's only a 2 value block. But most likely, if you play this as a block, you will be taking damage because it's only a 2, and you will trigger the auto damage. So it's kind of like a weaker point blank from Yananga at that point. So it's an okay card. Next up, Outrageous Fortune, 1 value, versatile. During combat, discard the top card of your deck. You add its boost value to this card's value. So you are blind boosting this during combat. And then after combat, if you lost the combat, you return this card, well, the card you discarded, to your hand. So if you lost, well, if you played this on defense, that means you took damage. But as a consolation, you at least bumped up the value of this, and you get that other card into your hand. So you didn't mill your card. Well, you did mill yourself a card from deck, but at least it's not completely lost value because you'll get to play the card from hand. So if you attack with this, it also can be pretty strong because if they feint it, fine. If you chose your ability not to be, you're going to deal a damage over the feint still. If they don't feint it and they max value block, this is a pretty good one to throw when you choose to be, because a lot of times you're probably going to lose the combat. You know, if you get a 2 boost, this is only a 3. That loses pretty often, but then you get the card back into your hand at least. So it's kind of like a cool little regroup in that regard. Next up, the Readiness is all 2 value versatile. After combat, place one of the fighters in the combat in any space. You can choose either yourself or the opponent, so that's pretty cool. And they cannot leave that space this turn. So if you play this as a defense against a first action attack, then you get to put them wherever you like, and they can't get away. And even the sidekicks can use this, so that's really important. If they try to attack your sidekick, you can throw them up adjacent to Hamlet, and then choose not to be, and then get your +2 for a double attack. That's really, really strong. So this card is sneakily good, I would say. Next up is the Plays the Thing. So 3 value versatile. After combat, if your opponent... Oh, it's not even conditional. After combat, your opponent discards a random card. Very strong. We all know how good random discards are, like Ambush. This is crazy good. And if you won the combat, Hamlet recovers health equal to its boost value. So if you attack with this, you're almost always winning the combat if you used your ability, because it's a printed 5. So that's, again, almost always winning, and you will get healing on top of this. And if they cancel it, okay, you did 3 damage over a feint, and you're pretty happy with that. If you play this on defense, it's a surprise discard, because then your opponent can't really react to the random discard, because they most likely maneuvered up to you and then attacked you, and that's the end of their turn. So you get to start your turn with them having discarded a random card that they don't get to prepare for. They can't maneuver to create more distance. They can't draw more cards. It's a sneaky good discard when you can do it on defense, especially. So this card being a 3 copies and an any, this is just really, really good card. One of the strongest in the deck for sure. Next up, this scheme is crazy. It's called Method in the Madness. 3 boost value, again, is important for your boosting effect, like Cruel to be Kind, or some of your blind boosts as well. But you put any number of cards in your hand on the bottom of your deck, then draw up to that many cards, and you gain an action. So if you have 7 cards in hand, you can put all 7 on the bottom of your deck, and you draw up to that many cards. So you could get a full new 7 if you're trying to be aggressive and you were just digging for a certain specific card. Then you can use it like that. Or you can put all 7 back and draw a 0, and you gain an action, of course, but then you can double maneuver, and you draw however many cards, depends on which ability you chose, for the question. But you're going to draw a couple of cards, and then you netted cards back into your deck. So that's going to help you out a lot in Fatigue. So this card is very important for that, especially because if you get into a spot where you don't want to be taking damage yourself, then you're going to have to be drawing 2 cards per maneuver. So this card can definitely help you out and mitigate that a little bit. But again, it can also be used aggressively if you just want to find certain cards and find your damage. So I really love that card, especially the 3 boost value. You can ditch it for a boost. It's just awesome overall. Super, super cool. And last but not least, we have the Ghost. So this is 2 copies of this one. You just choose one of these effects. You either Hamlet recovers 2 or place Hamlet in any space in his zone and you gain an action. So it's not quite as good as Mist Form if you choose the placement effect because it has to be within his zone, which is a little bit unfortunate, but you can still find opportunities to make use of that to go for a double attack, I believe, if you're trying to be aggressive and close out the game. Or recovering the 2 health, of course, is very good, and this is the only real pass in his deck. Again, Method in the Madness could be used kind of like a pass, even like a super pass, like by adding cards to your deck, but it all depends on the game state and how you choose to use that one. But this one's a really simple pass, just recovering 2 health and passing. Very, very strong. So that is Hamlet for you. He seems super cool. I'm very interested in him, but he does seem like he's very map dependent because he's going to most likely want something small because I think more often than not, he's going to have to kill the opponent. He will die in fatigue pretty hard. So I think he's going to have to be the aggressor and being the one pushing the damage to close it. So he's going to want a small map, something like Raptor Paddock or Hierorod or something like that. But if you do get a good map for him, I can see him being an absolute menace because his damage output is pretty insane. So I'm really interested to play this guy more. I have not seen too much of him in action. Definitely can see a spike problem where the opponent just kites you all game. And on a big map, again, that would be pretty terrible. But if you get a smaller map, it's probably not too big of a deal. So all you Hamlet mains out there, I want to see cool stuff happening. Floam, you've been very vocal about Hamlet, so let's see some good pop-offs from you with Hamlet. I would love to see it. But I'm excited to play him more myself, but let's go ahead and move on to our next fighter. Okay, next up we're going to take a look at Titania. So Titania is a ranged fighter with 12 starting health, move 2. Sidekick Oberon is melee and 6 starting health. The ability is Fairy Magic. If you do not have a face-up Glamour at the start of your turn, flip the top card of your Glamour deck face up. Its effect is ongoing while it remains face up. So that is a super cool ability. It essentially gives you an extra ability that changes throughout the game. So it's some kind of passive ability that is going to apply as long as it remains face up, but there's a lot of cycling of the glamours so that you can switch up what your ability is essentially throughout the game. So that's really cool. And before you take a look at the cards in the deck, let's go ahead and take a look at the glamours. I should have done this first as well with the sisters, but oh well. First up, we have Glamour of Invisibility. So your fighters may move through opposing fighters. So this essentially makes you into Buffy. Very cool. Next up, we have Glamour of Love. When you maneuver, you may move an opposing fighter 1 space before moving your fighters. That is really, really good. So if they are camping a space, let's say on an item map, you can move them off of the item, move yourself onto the item, and then make an attack with the item. So that is super cool. I think this is one of the better abilities. It can also save you from having to boost by moving them 1 space closer before you maneuver. Especially since Titania is ranged, you can move them into a different zone that you can single maneuver to without having to boost. So Glamour of Love, really strong. Next up, Glamour of Jealousy. This one's also very strong. When Titania or Oberon are attacked, before playing a card, they may swap spaces, and if you do, your other fighter is now the defender. So as long as this Glamour is face up, every one of your defenses are essentially tacking on under Achilles' Helm effect. So that is really, really nice. You get to pick and choose who's being attacked based on the game state. Very strong. Next up, Glamour of Sleep. Your fighters do not take damage other than combat damage. Holy cow, this ability is insane. So you become Khonshu, essentially, with this ability. Not with the attack buff, but with the anti-auto damage effect. Basically, you can't take auto damage, you can't take fatigue damage. This is just really, really good. If you make it to the end game and you guys are both exhausted and you have this Glamour up, you can just maneuver infinitely without taking any damage. Meanwhile, your opponent is dying to fatigue. So this is one of the most powerful abilities, that's for sure. Then Glamour of Greed. At the end of your turn, you may draw a card. So this is like Bigfoot's ability, but it's not conditional on the zones. You can just do it whenever you like. So at the end of your turn, you can draw. So this is really good if you're trying to be aggressive. Next up, I believe this is the last one. Yeah, last but not least, we have Glamour of Rhyme. After you play a scheme, you gain an action. There are a lot of really powerful schemes in this deck that become even crazier when you are gaining an action when you play them. We've already seen Momentary Glance revealed from Baked Goods. doing a momentary glance for 2 auto damage and then gaining an action and still being able to attack leads to some really big burst lethals. So that is really, really cool. So as you can see, we have these 6 glamours, and each of them does their own cool effect. It's very cool. And so let's go ahead and, with all that in mind, you know, let's take a look at the actual cards in the deck. Just don't forget about the cool glamours here. So what is the first card we are going to see? It is Queen of the Fairies. This we got to reveal on stream during the Winner of Champions finals, which is really cool. But it's a 2 value attack. It's a 3 boost value. You're probably not going to boost with this often, if ever, but that's important to if you're desperate, I guess. And during combat, increase the value of this card by +1 for each glamour in your glamour discard pile. We saw there are 6 glamours. If all 6 have been discarded, this is an 8 value attack. Of course, it can be feinted, but that's if the opponent still has their feints remaining near the end of the game, which means they have to hold them throughout the mid game, which means you get more effects. So Queen of the Fairies, really, really strong card. 2 copies, 2 8s potentially is a lot of damage output there. But a Dream. We also saw this one revealed by Maneuvermen pretty recently, which was an amazing video. If you have not seen that, go check it out. But immediately you get to cancel all effects on your opponent's card, ignore its value, and return it to your opponent's hand. So it just completely nullifies the opponent's card and the opponent's attack altogether. And then after combat, you draw 1 card. So only Titania can use this, but it's a really good defense for... It's not good in the value sense, right? Because you are using a card and they don't lose anything, but it's good in the tempo sense. If you're trying to get them down to a lethal range to kill them before they kill you, this can be really powerful. Or if it's something like, I don't know, your opponent attacks with a card that's kind of situational, like a Beast Form, and the Beast Form's going to lethal you, but then you use Blood of Dream to return it, and Beast Form relies on having cards in hand to discard. And so now you like double attack Dracula on your turn for the counter attack, and he's forced to spend cards on defense, and now maybe that Beast Form doesn't lethal you anymore. So even though this doesn't fully like cancel a card in the long term, it can still definitely make a big impact. So really cool card, awesome new effect. Then we are going to see Protection of the Fairy Woods. So this is more of your standard feint. It's immediately you may discard your glamour, and if you do, cancel all effects on your opponent's card. 3 copies of this, it's an any, it's really strong. Of course, it can't be used offensively because it is a blue card, but still really nice to have in the deck. You just have to cycle your glamour in order to get the cancel. And you know what? Cycling the glamours, sometimes you want to cycle them because you're on a glamour that's not helping you in the matchup, and you're able to get to one that might help you. But then there's other times, of course, where you are on one that you would like, and you really don't want to cycle off of it. So it's kind of got some give and take there. You got to make the decision of whether or not you want to cycle. But then we see this cool card, The Moon Looks Down. So Titania 3 value versatile, 2 copies. After combat, put a discarded glamour on the bottom of your glamour deck. So even if you're on a glamour you like, you know you're going to want it later, like that no auto damage, no fatigue damage one. You can feel okay cycling off of it with something like the Protection of Fairy Woods, because you're going to buff up your Queen of the Fairies by doing so, you're going to get your cancel, and then you're able to put it at the bottom of your glamour deck using this, so that you don't lose it for good. You can always bring it back. So having 2 copies of this is very important for setting up your end game with your glamours. And next up, As Wise as Beautiful. This is kind of the regroup of the deck. 2 value versatile. After combat, you draw a card. You may discard your glamour to draw 2 instead. So it's a little bit stronger than regroup being a 2 value versatile instead of 1, but nothing to write home about. This card is just okay. Whisked Away, on the other hand, this card is crazy good. So it's a max value block, like a skirmish, but after combat, you move your fighter up to 2 spaces. It's not conditional on winning the combat like the skirmish is. And then you may discard your glamour, and if you do, you place your fighter in any space. So you can get even further away from your opponent if you want to discard your glamour. Or if they're attacking you from ranged, like with a sidekick, maybe you can teleport into the zone of the hero to get set up for a double counterattack turn by discarding your glamour. So 3 copies of this, incredibly strong card here. Very, very versatile. Next up, we're going to see Fairy Song. So during combat, you may discard your glamour. If you do, the value of this card is 5 instead. 3 copies, it's really strong. It's like a momentous shift. You can easily use it as a 5 value defense just by cycling your glamour. I love this card. It's one of the strongest cards in the deck for sure. Not very flashy, but man, is it a good one. Next up, we're going to see Parting Gift. This is a cool card because after combat, you may deal 2 damage to each fighter in the combat. Now, this is an any, so Oberon is able to use this, like on defense, for example, and that's pretty good when, if he was going to die anyways, you get to deal 2 damage to the opponent in the process. So that's really nice. And of course, this also combos with the Glamour, where you ignore the auto damage, so only the opponent would take the auto damage in that case. So it's much like Khonshu does with his card there that deals the 2 auto as well. So 2 copies of that, pretty nice damage output. Then, of course, we have the Momentary Glance, 2 copies of this, 4 boost value, just like from Medusa's deck. Deal 2 damage to any fighter in Titania's zone. So, really, really good card here. Again, if you can chain schemes with action gain, Momentary Glance becomes incredibly scary burst potential if you start getting a little low on HP. And then we have Gift of the Fair Folk. So choose 2 different effects. Either one fighter recovers 2 health, draw 2 cards, or move 2 fighters up to 2 spaces each. So this is a really good card. Again, it's very versatile. You have 3 different options. You get 2 of them. So you either get movement and card draw if you're trying to be aggressive. You get movement and healing if you're trying to play defensive. And that's really nice because also if you're being aggressive and you have the action gain, you can move both the 2 fighters, right? So move the opponent and move Titania into position to attack. You draw 2 cards, you gain an action, you haven't spent anything, so it's kind of like a remote control from Tesla. You even loaded up your hand with more cards, more ammunition, and then you just double glance them and blast them with 2 attacks, and you can deal, you know, probably upwards of 6+ damage easily in a single turn. So that's pretty great if you're trying to be aggressive. But also, just healing is really good if you're trying to be defensive as well. Then we have a couple of Oberon cards here. The 5 value red, 3 copies is really good. After combat, you place Oberon in a space adjacent to Titania. So Oberon, remember, is melee, but you can move up to the opponent, attack them with a 5. If they cancel, cool, you got 3 damage. If not, well, you might have gotten at least 1 damage, because even over a max value block, this will deal the 1. And then you get Oberon to safety because he will warp adjacent to Titania after the combat. So Met by Moonlight, really, really strong attack. Definitely a reason to keep Oberon alive because you have 3 copies of this. You're going to want to get your damage output in here. And last but not least, we saw this revealed from Mr. Baked Goods in that incredible video of his. What fools these mortals be. Choose an opponent, look at their hand, choose a card, they shuffle that card into their deck. Again, think of how good this is when you gain an action by playing this. So yeah, they don't lose the card permanently because it's not discarded like Sherlock would do, but you're still getting it out of their hand, depleting their hand count, and knocking out a key defense. So you play, imagine playing 2 of these cards, they action gain, they chain together, you ripped out 2 of your opponent's best defenses, now maybe they have 0 defenses, and you smack them with a Met by Moonlight, or a Queen of the Fairies, or a Fairy Song bumped up to a 5, or even a Whisked Away. Anything. I mean, when you're landing undefended hits like that, it's incredibly deadly, so you can see very quickly how the burst potential of this deck can add up. And overall, it's a really versatile deck because you do have that burst potential, you have decent damage output, but you also have really good defenses with But a Dream, you have your cancel, you have a 5 value defense here, you have 3 really, really nice defenses with Whisked Away. So on top of that, you can heal up to 6 health with Gift of the Fair Folk. You can have Oberon take attacks for you with the Glamour, and then you can avoid auto damage and fatigue damage with the other Glamour. So you can play a pretty strong defensive game as well, but I don't think you can play defensive from the get-go. I think this character has to be playing a pretty tempo-oriented game during the mid-game, and then you kind of pivot in the end game to either a defensive fatigue-oriented strategy or an aggressive burst combo strategy to close out the game depending on how the game state looks and how things went in the mid-game. I don't think it's very reasonable to sit on the no auto damage Glamour and not cycle with any of your Glamour effects and make it to the end game and then just win in fatigue. It's a dream that I don't think is going to come true. It's but a dream. So she really just doesn't have the printed defense values to sustain an entire game only playing defensive. You have to push the tempo and make your opponent scared to give yourself some breathing room. Because if you're not giving yourself breathing room and you just keep getting attacked constantly, you're going to crumble because your values aren't the best. So yeah, she's really cool though. I'm very curious to see what people can do with her because again, she can play so many different ways and she has a lot of really cool effects. So I personally think the burst combo at the end game is the coolest way to play her and probably going to end up being the most successful, but you guys feel free to prove me wrong. I would love to see otherwise, but really cool character here, and let's move on to the last one. Okay, last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Shakespeare himself. So Shakespeare's a melee fighter, 13 starting health, move 2. Seems like pretty bad stats so far, huh? But he has actors who are melee as well, but they are token sidekicks. So just 3 1 health sidekicks there with the actors. And the ability Iambic Pentameter. After you attack or defend, you add your card to your line. When your line has 10 or more syllables, you discard your line. And then if there are exactly 10, you resolve the completion effects on the last card. So this is a really, really strong ability. It's very much like Little Red, where you are trying to line up your cards and play them in a certain order to trigger some really strong effects. But if you're able to aggress Shakespeare, he doesn't have the best defenses, and you're able to maybe throw off his line completions to force him into more than 10 syllables, then you can make him whiff on his line, and that is a big deal. But a smart Shakespeare will make that very difficult for you to do, so let's go ahead and take a look at the cards in his deck. So first off, we have the Horror. So you've seen this before. It's a 4 value attack, 3 boost value, and there are 5 copies in the deck, which is the most number of copies we've seen of any card in a deck yet. And during combat, you increase the value of this card by +1 for each Horror card in your line. So if you play multiples within the same line, this is even stronger. So if it's fainted, you're dealing 2 damage, and if it's max value blocked, you'll essentially deal a damage for every other Horror in your line. So really, really strong attack here. It's a 2 syllable only, so you can play plenty of them in the same line before you are completing it and discarding all those cards in the line. And then if this is the last card in the line, you deal 1 damage to the opposing fighter for each other card in your line. So wow, this could be a ton of auto damage that cannot be stopped because of course the line effects, once the line completes, there is nothing to stop that effect from happening. It will happen no matter what. So, you know, if you have 3 other cards in your line and you finish off the line at 10 syllables with this, even if they feint this, it doesn't matter. They can't stop it. You've completed your line, and they are going to take 3 auto damage for those other 3 cards in the line. So that's just really, really strong. And also, we have Horror. This one's the Spider. And then we have the Horror of Snakes. And then we have the Horror of Bats. And we have, this may be the most terrifying looking one to me. Just like the Horror of Blood or something. It's very terrifying. And this one's also very terrifying. The Horror of Fire, it looks like. Those last 2 are really something. But really cool to see a different art on the 5 copies of this card. That is very, very unique. And really signifies this as, you know, like a signature card in his deck. So super cool. And of course, next up, we've seen My Kingdom for a Horse. This is 6 syllables, so it's almost going to complete a line by itself, you know, very quickly. And if this completes the line, you gain 2 actions. That is just incredibly strong. There's 3 copies of this. It's a printed 5. This is just such a deadly card and can make for some insane combo potential from Shakespeare. Next up, I revealed this one pretty recently with a fun little game. Thank you to everybody who participated in that, but we see All Are Punished. So, a 4 value attack. After combat, deal a damage to each other fighter in your zone. So this will hit your own fighters, so just be careful of that. You don't want to end up blowing up all your actors with your own card. That would be a true tragedy. But if this card completes the line, you draw a card. That is quite a weak line completion effect, with all things considered. But this is a good one to kind of start a line, right? It's 4 syllables on its own, so you could do All Are Punished right into My Kingdom for a Horse and gain the 2 actions with just 2 attacks. So that is really important. If the opponent ever approaches you and you complete a line on defense, you can give them a good old 1-2 punch with the All Are Punished into Kingdom for a Horse, and you've done those 2 attacks and you lose 0 actions because it resets your turn essentially with the horse. So that's really, really powerful. Next up, we're going to see Places, Places. After combat, move each actor up to 3 spaces. So nothing too crazy, but it's going to let you reposition your actors. It's 4 syllables, and then its completion effect is place Shakespeare in a zone with no actors. Also pretty weak in terms of line completion, but you got to have some weaker cards so you can make room for stronger ones, so it's a fine card. Next up, the Ides of March. So 2 copies of this. Completion effect is deal 2 damage to any opposing fighter, and that's really good because it doesn't matter where they are. It doesn't matter, if they were the one in the combat or not. Doesn't care about zones. You're just dealing 2 damage to any opposing fighter like a misdirection would from Houdini. That's really, really strong. And with 4 syllables, you can probably fit this into a line completion pretty easily. But otherwise, it is a blank 2, so you most likely want to be attacking with this, because defending with a blank 2 is pretty bad. Next up, we see Alas. So this is one of the most pivotal cards, I think, in the deck. So after combat, if you lost the combat, Shakespeare recovers 1 health. And then its completion effect is to draw 2, and Shakespeare recovers 2 health yet again there. So this can be upwards of 3 healing from a single card. And I think that's really important because Shakespeare does have low starting HP, and he doesn't have the best defenses. So I think you're going to want to use this to get your healing more often than not. Next up, we're going to see once more Onto the Breach. After combat, you return a defeated actor to a space in Shakespeare's zone, but if this card completes the line, then you return all defeated actors to spaces in Shakespeare's zone. Holy cow, we already know how annoying that can be from a card like Call for Backup from Muldoon. So just getting 3 token sidekicks back is such an incredibly huge pain for the opponent to deal with. And there's 2 copies of this in the deck, so you're definitely going to want to utilize this to just be really annoying with your actors and bog down your opponent. And now the actors are extra important in this deck because they don't do a whole lot themselves, but what they do is soak up attacks where you don't have to play cards defending, because they're just token sidekicks. So therefore, you don't have to mess up your line as you would if they're attacking Shakespeare himself. Because if they're attacking Shakespeare himself, let's say you have 8 syllables down and you only have a 4-syllable defense in hand, then you have to choose either, okay, do I play this card as just its card and I whiff on my line because I go over 10 up to 12, and that's a big waste? Or do I just take it undefended so that I can set up a line completion on offense during my next turn, right? And that's a tough decision. But if you have these token sidekicks, they can just eat up attacks without having to play a card. That is really, really important. So this card, incredibly strong, and I think people are going to hate this card, honestly. But next up, we see Deceive. So immediately cancel all effects on your opponent's card. It's a straight up feint. But if you complete the line with this card, you return this to your hand. Holy cow, being able to recur a bunch of extra feints is incredibly strong, as we all know. So somebody like Sinbad would really, really hate to play against this. So Deceive is incredibly strong. Next up, we're going to see Et tu, Brute, or Et tu, Brute. I'm not sure exactly the pronunciation, but during combat, you increase the value of this card by +1 for each of your fighters adjacent to the opposing fighter. This is your best value block because it is automatically a 4, because it's increasing by +1 for the fighter who's playing this card, as long as they're attacking you from adjacency, I guess. But yeah, this is really good. It's an easy 4. It can get up to like a 6, depending on how you set up your actors. So this is best used on defense, but of course it can be used on offense as well, but I just do think there's better options on offense. But the completion effect is you place each of your fighters in any space. So that's pretty nice for positioning, but again, I think that's very much not impactful in the grand scheme of things when you can do crazy amounts of auto damage, gain ridiculous actions, reborn all your actors, recycle feints, heal. I mean, there's so much better stuff. I don't think this is very good for completion, but it is an incredibly strong card for defense, so don't overlook that. Next up, we have Revise. This is basically Regroup, but it had to be renamed because it needs 2 syllables, and it needs a completion effect, which is move each fighter up to 2 spaces. This does include opposing fighters, so that's pretty neat. It might help set up some cool combos in 2v2 and whatnot, but as a 1v1 card, this card is pretty lackluster, but again, you got to have some duds in the deck somewhere. Then we're going to see a couple of actor cards to close it out. We have, again, this card's crazy good because after combat, you may return the first card in your line to your hand, and that's before you add this to your line. So this can really help out with the line manipulation to make sure that you hit those 10 syllables, and it can also just be recursion, right? Just like Battle Hardened. You can just recur this, and if you play this and then as your first card in the line, and then you play the other copy, there's 3 copies of this, mind you, you can just keep looping these over and over. So if there's ever a scenario where you pin your opponent with actors, you can just keep attacking and looping with this card and keep defending and looping with this card as well, over and over and over. It's like an infinite wall of attacks and defenses. Of course, if your actors stay alive and hold the pin. But overall, this card's amazing. Completion effect is only to draw a card, so you don't care about that. Again, you're just going to be looking to recur the first card in your line. This is a really, really strong card because of that. And then the last card we're going to see is Such Sweet Sorrow. So a max value block for the actors. That's really, really good because sometimes you actually do want to defend your token sidekicks, and this is going to let them live more often than not because your opponent isn't going to want to spend their highest value attacks simply on token sidekicks, so this almost will always let them live. So after combat, you can move your fighter up to 2 spaces, so it's kind of like a non-conditional skirmish. The completion effect, again, is draw 1 card. Again, not very good, but this is an amazing card regardless. And, you know, 2 copies in the deck, it's definitely going to make the actors a pain in the butt. So look out for this. And that's the deck. A really interesting point to note with Shakespeare is there are 0 blue cards and there are 0 yellow cards, right? So no pure defenses and no schemes in the deck, which is really, really interesting. There's a lot of red cards, and then the rest are versatile. But, of course, you basically have schemes attached onto every one of your cards, because if they are used to complete a line, you get a non-cancelable effect from the line completion, much like a scheme would do, you know. So, essentially, your whole deck is a scheme, which is pretty amazing. Now, this fighter, his defenses are very lackluster. As you can see, Shakespeare himself has nothing above a printed 3. And he does have Et 2 Brute, which, like I mentioned, is very important defense because it is essentially a 4 and could get even higher. But there's only 2 copies, so he really can't withstand a ton of hits. And once again, that makes this healing that I mentioned with Alas all the more impactful, especially because he only has 13 starting health. And again, the actors are so crucial in protecting Shakespeare and just being in the way, soaking up attacks. That's really, really strong. So even though it seems like this guy might be another Wukong because he has so many actors and he can get them back so many times with Once More, Unto the Breach, and he can even recycle Once More with Again. So it seems like he could essentially have infinite wall of annoying token sidekicks. I mean, he has no passes for schemes, right? And again, with his low starting health, I just don't see him being a fatigue fighter at all. He reminds me very much of Houdini, where he has plenty of damage output and plenty of combo potential. And you just want to be pushing the tempo, and you want to do big burst combos and play carefully and just, you know, kill your opponent before they can kill you. So he's not likely going to just sit back and relax. He may here and there just to preserve, like I said, his line combos and let the actor soak up attacks, but he's going to be the aggressor more often than not. So I can't wait to see how this guy impacts the meta. I think he's definitely the best of the set in terms of power level in a competitive setting. People like Chad, who specialize in this character, are just going to wreak havoc upon the Unmatched universe, and I'm really excited to see it because I think this character is super cool. I might end up hating him. He might be a scumbag, just like Houdini, but, you know, even though they might be scumbags, I still respect the character. I respect the design because I think it is a really interesting one. It's very fun, and it rewards good players for mastering such a complex character. So really excited to see Shakespeare in action. And that's going to do it for Slings and Arrows, everybody. All right, guys, there you have it. That's going to do it for Unmatched Slings and Arrows, the brand new set. I hope you're all excited. I know I am. I'm really looking forward to seeing these fighters played in competitive play. I know it's going to be a little while till Summer of Legends, but I think there's some room for specialists to really make something happen with these characters. I think Shakespeare is definitely going to shake things up the most, but I do think that people, if they dedicate to one of these other characters, they can definitely pull out some really cool wins. I know it's getting harder and harder to specialize in this game because there's so many characters, and you want to play them all because they're all just so cool, right? But if anybody really does hone in on a single one, that'll be really cool to see. And yeah, this is up for sale right now. So if you want your own set, go pre-order it from Restoration Games' website. I say pre-order. I shouldn't say pre-order technically because you will be getting it pretty soon. But if you want to order from your local game stores, that is respectable as well. You're just going to be waiting a little bit longer. So if you want it ASAP, go order from Restoration right now. That's going to be your fastest way. But yeah, let me know down in the comments what you guys think of the set. Who's your most anticipated fighter, and what do you think overall? I think it's a really cool set. Super fun mechanics, and I can't wait to see more and more mechanics pushed into the game, kind of like we saw in this set. Some really unique stuff, so that's really awesome. So guys, leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel, of course, if you're not already. I know most of you probably are, but if you're watching and you're not, please subscribe. It helps out the channel with the algorithm, of course. And if you guys want to go a little extra mile and help support me, consider supporting me on Patreon, because that is where you can cast your votes for Matchup of the Month, most importantly. And yes, I will be catching up on those soon, so don't worry. We're getting back into the swing of things. And yeah, you can cast your votes, but any support on the Patreon really helps the channel. It helps support me in getting more content out there. It helps me fund my editor, Darkblade. So yeah, if you want more content, best way to support is through Patreon. And I appreciate all the support from everybody out there on all the platforms. You guys are the best. So that's going to do it for the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. But thanks again for watching. I'm ZeroSkater12, and I'll see you next time.